Oprah Winfrey once said, "I am where I am because of the bridges that I crossed." Sojourner Truth was a bridge. Harriet Tubman was a bridge. Ida B. Wells was a bridge. Madam C.J. Walker was a bridge. Fannie Lou Hamer was a bridge. There's an ongoing list of Black women who were bridges. These are just a few examples. We are blessed to have another bridge with us today. She's an author, an educator, and a leader. She wrote a book and has a TED Talk about dismantling structures that oppress Black girls in schools and in society. She founded a nonprofit national organization called the National Black Women's Justice Institute. She's also an executive film producer and writer of a documentary film discussing exclusionary discipline and how it impacts Black girls in the U.S. She has over 3 decades experience in education and is a former justice advocate for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. She was raised by a proud Black woman and is raising proud Black girls. Introducing my shiro, who I'm proud to call my mother, Dr. Monique W. Morris.
I was gonna say, but I do know Black girls are popping. I've known that a long, long time. I am so pleased to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be in community with you. I have a great degree of debt to Mrs. Green and Mr. Green. Thank you for putting on this event now for 33 years. To the Bishop O'Dowd community for inviting me to be in community with you. I want to start by acknowledging that Black Lives Matter. Long before it was a hashtag and a social movement, Black Lives Matter to those of us in the Black Freedom Movement. This work has been a mattering project, a project about being of significance, about being seen and acknowledged. Black History Month matters to all of us. While Dr. Carter G. Woodson launched this important season of recognition with Negro History Week in 1926, recorded and oral histories have long established not only the significance of having a time set aside to acknowledge and celebrate the history and contributions of people of African descent in the United States, but also her story is and has always been a critical element of that. Not a peripheral issue, a central one. Black women and girls have always been a part of the freedom movement, sometimes leading it to demand an end to oppression, sometimes agitating those who share our conditions to recognize our value. Black women and girls, when we know who we are, have always been a divine force within the articulation of justice in this country and elsewhere in the world. In the blues tradition, Coco Taylor called it being an earth shaker. From ancient deities like Ma'at in Egypt, Oshun in Nigeria, historical figures like slavery abolitionist Harriet Tubman and anti-lynching advocate and publisher Ida B. Wells, to political forces like Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black woman to run for president as an unbought and unbossed candidate. And the many creatives, artists, poets, and dancers who grace our consciousness and gift us with cultural language, slang, and other popular references, whether we know it or not, in our walk, in our talk, in our dance, in our song, in our intellect, and keen sense of justice is the power that shakes the earth. Maya Angelou called it being phenomenal. Black girls and young women, I see you. Well, where you at, really? Black women. Okay, Black women and girls, I see you. Family, friends, and allies who recognize, I see you. Haters, I see you too. In my scholarship, I sit at the feet of narratives by Harriet Jacobs, a self-liberated Black woman who used her life to challenge the fugitive slave law. I study the teachings of Elaine Brown, former chairman of the Black Panther Party, and scholar activist Dr. Angela Davis, whose intellectual and radical articulations of Black freedom demanded a rigorous gender analysis that refused the tendency to render Black women educators, organizers, and other soldiers in the fight for justice invisible. And I learned from radical Black feminist scholar activists like Audrey Lorde, who invited us to acknowledge that there is no hierarchy of oppression. How many of you have heard of Audrey Lorde? Okay, y'all gonna learn about her today. Audrey Lorde wrote this piece in 1983. I was born Black and a woman. I'm trying to become the strongest person I can become, to live the life I have been given, and to help effect change toward a livable future for this earth and for my children. As a Black, lesbian, feminist, socialist, poet, mother of two, including one boy, and a member of an interracial couple, I usually find myself part of some group in which the majority defines me as deviant, difficult, inferior, or just plain wrong. And then she goes on to say, I cannot afford the luxury of fighting one form of oppression only. I cannot afford to believe that freedom from intolerance is the right of only one particular group. And I cannot afford to choose between the fronts upon which I must battle these forces of discrimination, wherever they appear to destroy me. And when they appear to destroy me, it will not be long before they appear to destroy you. This is the work. At the National Black Women's Justice Institute, the organization that I founded, we work with organizations to reduce domestic violence, sexual assault, and intimate partner violence that takes place in Black communities. We work with formerly incarcerated girls and women to expand the opportunity landscape for formerly incarcerated women and girls. And we work to interrupt school-to-confinement pathways, pathways that lead Black girls and other girls who disproportionately experience exclusionary discipline, the suspensions, expulsions, corporal punishment, etc., into contact with the juvenile court system. We do this by engaging a framework that we call intersectionality, terminology that was a gift from a Black woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, a brilliant legal scholar with a dual appointment today at UCLA Law School and Columbia University Law School, which invites us to explore the construct of race and protection from racial bias in ways that help us understand race, gender, sexual identity, ability, and other identities, and understand that they are never single actors. Instead, this is about how the many identities we live with inform how we experience each other, the institutions that we're a part of, the cultural norms we're a part of, and how we see and communicate with ourselves. And also how we use this information to transform our communities to become spaces where we live the justice we seek. Fundamentally, I started the National Black Women's Justice Institute because I wanted to create a space where we demand what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the practice of power correcting everything that stands against love. And I wanted it to pertain specifically to Black women and girls because we matter. Black feminine energy is a healing source for this nation's articulation of democracy and for its promise of equal justice. You're welcome.
Yes.
Y'all are a serious group. I hope you're paying attention. Everyone plays a role in this work. And that's really where I'd like to end my personal remarks and begin with a call to action. So I do hope you're listening. How will you participate in determining how, when, and where you show up to demand that the recognition of Black women's narratives and social political contributions become as mainstream as the entertainment and culture we produce? How will you practice effective allyship by intentionally countering personal biases and violence of erasure that you may consciously or unconsciously participate in? How How will you learn more about and uplift your personal practice of intersectionality and demand more from each of us individually and all of us collectively? Because in this community building project lies the promise of love. How and when will you join this mattering movement? Black women and girls, I see you. You're sacred and you're loved. I travel the country telling everybody that, because it's true. We matter. Thank you.